10 years ago, a game released on Steam. A game that would revolutionize the city builder genre forever. And that game is Banished. Rather than follow the standard city builder formula established by games like SimCity, Banished introduced an element of survival. You had to manage your citizens and resources to survive the elements, plagues, and other disasters. But most of all, mismanagement would bring your entire civilization crashing down. Now, I'm not positive if Banished is truly the first ever survival city builder or not, but it is the first game that truly defined a new genre. Much like Age of Empires defines real-time strategy or Diablo defined action RPGs, everything truly began with Banished, and many games have attempted to recapture its essence ever since. So today, just over 10 years from the release of Banished, we are jumping back into the game to ask one simple question. Is this game as good as I remember? Is it truly groundbreaking and amazing even by today's standards? Or am I just a nostalgic sucker and this game is now a relic of the past and has been succeeded by more modern titles? Let's find out. Now, admittedly, it's been a long time since I last played this game, but I'm not worried about whether I can pick this back up, because, as I kind of alluded to before, so many survival city builders are ultimately derivative of this game. So I think it's going to be like riding a bike. Now let's take a quick look at the map. We are situated nicely with a river, a huge lake over this direction. We have some mountains across over here. Yeah, this seems like a pretty decent open space that I can work with. Let's go ahead and start by chopping down a bunch of resources, harvest some of the nearby trees, make some space, also clear out a bit of the stone, and let them get to work. We should also consider placing down a few very basic structures. I'm thinking a couple of houses would make sense, so 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. That's good. Maybe place down a quick road to tie everything together, and also I wouldn't mind having a little well in a good central location. Now, there are a couple of tools we are going to need, which are not on by default, and I always thought that was kind of weird, but we want to have a quick little statistics bar up over here showing some very basic resources, population, and so on, plus a little event log in case something important happens, and of course the oh-so-important professions tracker, which allows me to assign some people to specific jobs. This was kind of a revolutionary thing at the time. You didn't really have this kind of a micromanagement. It was something really pioneered in a big way by Banished. But obviously, if you've seen a lot of the other games on this channel, this is very familiar to you, and this is where it all started. My laborers are, of course, going to go around and chop down these trees, gather up some stone, and so on, and they're also the people who will bring resources from point A to point B. You always want to have at least a handful of laborers around. Unfortunately, Banished has a fairly straightforward AI. It always just deals with tasks in the order they were given, so even though I might say that getting some stuff over here to these buildings is a kind of higher priority, it's going to instead focus on chopping the trees first because that's the first order I gave it, then the stone, and then so on. So the order you do things does matter, at least a little bit, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal. While they are working on this, though, we should probably think about what other things we need, especially food. Since we're right here next to a river, a fishing dock would make a whole lot of sense. You want as much of the circle covering water as possible. This seems like an optimal location. As far as other options, we could try placing down some simple farms, but I don't know if I start with any seeds. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. That's something usually you have to really work toward later on. We definitely don't have any livestock for a pasture. Now, normally what you have to do is instead go for a hunting cabin and a gatherer's hut. Gather up some simple resources off the ground amongst the wooded areas in particular. Why? Well, because any of the vegetation we want, onions, mushrooms, herbs, etc., are all going to spawn in the older forests, places that are a little bit more established and have been around for a while. The same thing, I believe, is supposed to be true with the animal spawns. Now, normally you would think, well, what you want to do is just kind of have these as a stopgap measure, get some early food, and then transition over to an agrarian society with lots of agriculture and farms. And that certainly is the way that this game presents itself. You'd think that's what you want to do. Somewhere down the line, people did figure out mathematically the best thing to do is actually exclusively focus on hunting and gathering. You'd place down one of those huts for each of those. You'd also place down an herbalist hut to gather up herbs for medicine. And you'd get yourself a forester's lodge and assign only one person to work in this area and just maintain the forest, right? Plant new trees, keep this area nice and healthy and dense. And that was the mathematical best way of getting food in the game. I'll do that a little bit because I think it does look a little silly when you have just a whole bunch of circles of trees as your food generation sort of spread out throughout the map. That was always a little bit weird. But it was the best way to do things, and honestly, the only way to play the game optimally when you got to the very high difficulties. Houses are now starting to go up. That is going to be great. The aesthetic of this game is simple. Like, by today's standards, these graphics are pretty on par with a lot of indie games I've played, honestly, but they're not, like, remarkable. This game honestly could use a remaster, and I think it would look amazing. But this always had a very nice, quaint feel to it. There was always something about, like, the chimneys, especially in winter, just all over the city, burning through the firewood, and it just felt really good. I don't know what to say. It just felt really good. Speaking of firewood, we probably should consider getting ourselves a woodcutter next to the stockpile, because transportation time does matter in this game, so this could be useful. As for the houses themselves, of course, the way this works is you're going to have a man and woman move in, even as young as 13, and they'll be able to start popping out the babies. The age was always a little bit creepy on that way, but it is fine. As long as there's room, though, they can continue to have some children. And that was actually one of the more nuanced but very important mechanics for Banished. If you decided to go ahead and just keep building out homes because you had more young fertile couples and you thought that's what you were supposed to do, it was a very good way to find that you had more births than you could handle in your infrastructure and everything could come collapsing down. It's a harsh lesson everyone has to learn. At some point, what you do is you try to carefully manage the birth rate, and if you need to, you build up some boarding houses, places where people can live, but they won't have any children. That's the only way to safely expand in this game. Looks like the fishing hut is starting to go up. This is going to be great. It does have a barn nearby. Barns always stored a lot of tools, foods, other resources, and so on. Your stockpiles take care of the raw resources that can be out in the rain and no one cares. Logs, firewood, stone, and so on. So the location here is actually halfway decent. And of course we want to assign at least a couple of fishermen. We can have up to 4, but I can't afford too many right now. I don't have a lot of laborers to work with. Now, there are a couple other things you had to manage besides just the basic resources, right? You also have to worry about the health of your citizens, and good food variety as well as medicine is a way to deal with this. Also, happiness. This could go down as there are deaths and stuff, and no cemeteries and blah, blah, blah. Placing down churches and stuff was a good way to try to combat some of this as well. We can see our current weather and temperature. This isn't Fahrenheit, by the way. If this was Celsius, they'd be all basically dead. But yeah, this is going to be something to worry about. Of course, as we start getting through summer, it's going to get nice and hot. As we get into winter, that's when things start to get a little bit dire. And of course, for the winters, the two things you really need to worry about. Plenty of food stored up, because during the winter, a lot of things kind of become difficult to access. No farming, etc. And of course, some fuel in order to keep these houses nice and warm. We're going to be mostly relying on the firewood, which is why I need to get this woodcutter up and a-running. Though there is going to be things like coal later on. And of course, who could forget the infamous water deer of Banished? Yeah, these guys never, ever really cared about the basic laws of physics or swimming or anything like that. Like I said, the AI for this game was relatively straightforward. It didn't need to be especially complicated, though. You just had to have very basic pathing for your citizens, and everything else is just really minor detail at the end of the day. Forester's now done. We are not going to be planting anything. I only want one person assigned here, just to go around and plant trees. If I can clear out all these stones and the iron and everything else, I'm going to make this place super duper dense. This will take care of my food needs for a very long time. And the first snow is just now starting to set in. Okay, all the more reason we need to have things like firewood up and running. I've got my woodcutter, and only one person is able to work here, so that person usually finds themselves fairly overwhelmed. That said, we should be able to produce enough firewood. There we go. This house is taken care of. These 10-year-olds have moved in together. Whaler and Canis. Yeah, that was all. Yeah, it just always felt weird to me. 10-year-olds moving in, able to start having babies. There you go, though. I mean, it's the only way to make sure you don't have to wait, like, 18 years for people to reach adulthood, right? Just go ahead and put them to work at 10 and start procreating. It's great. We are, unfortunately, completely out of food right now. That said, I mean, with our fishermen doing their thing, I think we should be able to produce enough food to keep this going. It's not like I have a very large population, but this is going to get more and more treacherous as time goes on. And really, this should be all that I need for the very first year of the game. Everyone's housed. We should have enough food going around. The firewood situation's a little dire, but we got enough time to get this back up and running. We're okay. Stone houses, obviously, would be the better way to go as far as providing more warmth. But they're a lot more expensive, which is why I did not elect for them. We are going to need to worry about some production pretty soon, though, and this is where things start to get a little bit difficult once again. So I'm thinking we need things like, where is it? Tailoring? Yeah, we're pretty low on clothing. We should be producing at least a little bit of clothes, or rather some leather, just by virtue of hunting down some helpless animals. So I think this shouldn't be too difficult for us to start producing. And winter has left us. Now we are hitting the April showers of spring. Perfect. I do actually want to get a proper forester dedicated just to getting some trees planted and chopped, by the way. Even though I'm going to have an area that's meant really for food, this is still kind of important. I will admit, having not played this for a very long time, everything does feel a little bit slower than I remember. You know, the laborers getting around and actually chopping down all the trees and everything else. Like, actually getting some of these orders done takes a little bit of time. It's already late spring, and I feel like we've done absolutely nothing except use up all of our wood. Fortunately, one thing you can do is actually set some limits on a lot of your production. This is also kind of a revolutionary idea, or at least... yeah, maybe not revolutionary in the sense that it's not like anyone had tried this genre before anyway, but more of this is a necessary component of effective management, and it's something that a lot of games then emulated because it just makes a lot of sense. There go the water deer again. Gosh dang. You know, it's funny, by today's standards, I actually would probably skewer a lot of indie games for it. Admittedly, I think I'm giving a few things about this game a pass only because of the old school nostalgia to it, but yeah, you have to admit, this is a little silly. All right, so clothes are taken care of. The next thing I'll need to worry about then are going to be tools. Same situation as before. We're going to need a blacksmith. And we want to place it close to a bunch of different storage areas. And here we go. By the end of year 2, we have a blacksmith up and a running. Okay, so that takes care of most of our absolute necessities at the very beginning of the game. Now we start thinking about other ways we can improve. One of the big ones I can probably think of is to actually set up a school fairly early on if we can. Schools are not absolutely critical at the beginning of the game, but it is nice to have them if you can afford to spend a single person as a school teacher. This is going to make sure that your children are educated, and it turns out educated citizens are generally going to be more productive citizens. We can start doing a little bit of urban planning as I think through some of the big ticket items I'm going to eventually need. Examples being a market. This, of course, is a place where people are going to congregate a lot of resources and people can distribute them amongst all the houses nearby, so this should always be in a good urban area. Also wouldn't mind getting a town hall for the sake of it, also a chapel and eventually a cemetery. That's going to look pretty good. And we will want a trading post. So along this river, there's going to eventually be some guy in a rowboat who goes up and down the river, and that's all he does in life. But if there is a post, he will dock up and will have a chance to order a few different materials or trade for whatever he's currently carrying. The only way that I know of to actually gain any seeds that you're going to need for agriculture. Not something you can worry about too much at the very beginning of the game, but something you definitely don't want to ignore for very long either. Schoolhouse is just about finished. This comes at a good time. We have plenty of children to worry about. One teacher is all we need. Now, a fun quirk about Banished, your people will eventually start dying of old age or disease or the cold or hunger, whatever it's going to be, right? If at any point you have a teacher die and there are no laborers available to fill the position, all the students immediately cancel school and never go back. It's always been kind of weird. So it's one of the reasons you absolutely have to have laborers in excess in this game. I don't really know why it always worked out this way, but it did. Now, it may not be a bad idea to get myself an herbalist. If we're going to do that, we want it to be in the same old foresty area as these other buildings. Usually, you always build these 4 in clusters because it is the best possible way to do things. But the herbalist will gather up the herbs that are naturally spawning down here that we're not dealing with, and it will convert them into a medicine. You may have noticed my health has been dropping down a little bit. This is basically the way we get around that. I really don't know why the graphical style of this game does it so well for me, by the way, but it really does. There's just something so rustic about it. I don't know. It's got a charm to it. There's a lot of games out there that have tried to go too much for realism, and, you know, sometimes that's nice, but it can be a bit much. Or other times they go for something kind of cartoony, and, you know, again, that has its place, but this somehow just kind of struck a real good balance for me. I don't know. It's not exactly like the highest fidelity. Does this age extremely well in today's gaming scene? Probably not. But I still like it. Now let's see, we've got access to pretty much all the early game professions I care about here. Brewer, we're not going to worry about until we can start growing some stuff with our farms. So vendors, traders, those can make some sense. Stonecutters, I'm not worried about getting miners and quarries up and running. We've got a teacher, I don't need a physician, I don't need a cleric. Yeah, I feel like the next thing to worry about then is probably going to be things like the market. So we can go ahead and get started on this and have a couple of vendors running resources around. And then after that, I think it's time to go ahead and start looking at that trading post. Feels a little early to worry about that, but honestly, this might be about right. I mean, I feel a little bit more comfortable if I had better sources of logs. I know there's a lot of trees over here, but I'm trying to leave them alone. We can go ahead and deforest this area. We did clear this whole area out over here, and you can see it's taking a very long time for all the trees to grow. We're getting there, but it takes a while. Looks like the market is starting to go up right about now. There we go. Perfect. Look how beautiful that is. All right, and you can always assign a lot of vendors here. I don't feel like we need 12 vendors. 1 or 2 should do the job at the beginning of the game. And what are the ages of our citizens now? 35, 24, 30, etc. Okay. I don't remember what the age is when people on average start to die. I feel like it's in like the 40s/50s, kind of is when you'll start seeing people start to die off of older age. 40 does seem pretty young, admittedly, but I mean, it's olden times. Yeah, so that means probably by the end of year 6, I really want to have a chapel and a cemetery up and a-running, because as people start to die off from natural causes, hopefully, people get sad. And we don't like sadness. The cemetery is a good way of trying to counteract that. If there's a grave, people don't tend to be as sad. Definitely starting to run lower on people I can use, too. Waiting for these children to grow up. We've got 13 children. Only 3 of them are currently students getting educated. I do believe in this game that if you choose to have your children go become educated, the result is it takes longer for them to become functioning working adults. Right, I don't know the exact like ages. It's something like from 10 to 14 they're a student, and then after 14 they graduate. But if you skip school, then they just automatically become an adult who starts working. So that's the trade-off, right? Is you do have to worry about having less immediate available adults in order to, in the long term, have better people. In this case, looks like someone just became an adult and is now a laborer. If I could find Mila, I would, and find out exactly how old she is. Answer, 17. Oh, ouch. Okay. So, yeah, a long time then. I think maybe it's from 10 to 17 that you are going to be a student. It's a long time is the point. A very long time. So it's a trade-off. It is in the long term worth it, but it's one of the reasons I think you can make the argument you don't want the school, at least until your economy's in really good shape. I'm going to get myself another one of these hunting cabins, mainly because I don't seem to actually produce enough leather in order to keep making a good amount of clothing, so we're starting to struggle on that front. For real, though, I need to get this trading outpost up and a-running, see if I can start overproducing something and selling it off so we can get some seeds. I need some farming. Let's get a crop field down here and just see if I've got anything. I've got access to pumpkins. That is it. That's all I've got. Okay. It's probably okay. It might be worth growing at least a handful of these. So if we can get ourselves a little bit of extra labor, I'll go ahead and start doing some farming as soon as spring hits. Wow, we're still really struggling to keep on top of some basic resources. Food dips down to 0, then we start building it back up. Logs dip down to 0, we're building it back up. Yeah, I'm actually starting to remember why this game was actually considered to be very tough back in the day. Because it actually is a pretty delicate balancing act, especially in the early game. I can't afford to have people always assigned to be making things like clothing and tools. I shouldn't have people constantly making firewood, because I need every extra laborer I can get my hands on, just for everything else, especially during the harvest season. Come autumn, you need to make sure you have a lot of farmers ready to go, and then when winter comes, hey look, a surplus of labor. Now's the time to go do all of your building projects and stuff like that. It honestly was a really cool challenge. I just remember the feel of this game was so unique in a lot of ways. And it clearly made a mark on the industry. I mean, how many survival city builders are out there now? A lot of them. Some of which, I mean, like Settlement Survival comes to mind, are as close to a direct copy of this game as you can be, while also adding on some new mechanics and a bit of a modern flair. Now it is harvest season. We're about to find out just how many pumpkins I can get my hands on. I wish this did actually show you the exact yield you got this year, right? Exactly how much you get. I think somewhere is supposed to be some information about production statistics. There it is! Alright, so there is a way of finding out exactly how effective this is. And in this case, we can see that so far we've harvested about 281 pumpkins. I bet you there's another, I don't know, about 100 or so sitting there. Maybe a little bit more, so that's good. You can take a look at similar buildings here, like this hunting cabin. 600 venison in the current season, not bad. So that's turned out pretty well. What about things like the Gatherer's Hut? Yeah, look how much food we've been able to gather. This is still only 4 workers, right? Which is somewhat similar to the 3 workers I had over here to the crops with the pumpkins. But we're going to get maybe about 400 or 500 pumpkins out of the arrangement for 3 workers. In the case of the Gatherer's Hut, I made a lot more than that. So, yeah, I don't know. This just kind of is proof positive to me that, yeah, the Gatherer's Hut is by a long shot the best food-making building in the game. But you need to pair that up with a forester, even just one person, to make sure that there is a good, dense forest to pull from. Do that, and you're set. Which is why you really can have just big splotches of, hey, look, a whole bunch of trees with gatherers, and then you build out a bunch of urban areas, and then, oh, look, more trees with a bunch of gatherers, and then more city, and yeah, that's just kind of how it turned out. Not the best theming, but pretty darn powerful. Trading post should be finishing in just a moment. There we go. All right, and from here, we would be able to go ahead and start storing a lot of materials. I do think that firewood is considered to be one of the best value things you can put in here, but really anything you've got in excess. Herbs come to mind. It's not really a bad thing to go ahead and toss in here. We'll do the same with the firewood, blah, blah, blah. But now, as I said, there will periodically be somebody who is going to come down this river, and we'll be able to trade with them, hopefully finding some really good stuff. Definitely watching that population grow bit by bit here, though. 28 adults now, 11 students, and 10 children. All right, so the population curve is starting to go in my favor a little bit more. But that's partly because still nobody has died of old age. We've got people going into their late 40s now. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on the cemetery in preparation for when they will start to die. The chapel looks nice, but is not super important for me to get right now, not until happiness dips. We could get that town hall, and I believe that the town hall is going to give us the option to accept immigrants, though by doing so, we also open ourselves up to some plague, so we have to be careful about that. It's a risk. Sometimes getting the extra workers is worth it, but you could pair that up with something like a hospital, and that would also kind of eliminate the risk of having the immigrants joining up in your city. The next big transition we can start thinking about is actually going to be moving to things like stone houses. These are nice. They generate more warmth, so you don't consume nearly as much firewood so long as you have these up and running. And obviously, at a point where we're going to start selling things like firewood and such in order to actually get more seeds, preserving my firewood is not a bad efficiency boost. That said, tearing down a house in order to turn it into a stone house is not always pleasant. If we're going to do that, we almost would rather have some boarding houses up and running first, just so my people have a place to stay. Hey, here comes our first trader. All right, buddy, what are you carrying today? You got fish and apples. It's not especially helpful. All right, but, if I want to say, hey, Averiakiel, I would like you to just once bring me a new seed. How about, let's say, beans? I think some seeds are cheaper than others. Could be wrong on that. Actually, this guy may not be able to bring me seeds now that I think about it. Does this guy only bring produce? He may not actually bring seeds, in which case I'm not worried about this. We have to wait for a different trader to come through. It's been a while since I've had to worry about this. Getting wheat seeds is obviously going to be extremely useful because we will be able to start turning that into beer and stuff like that at a brewery, which can make people pretty happy. But I'm not feeling really worried about it right now. So, yeah, I think we just go ahead and dismiss this guy and send him on his merry way. I think we can afford to actually go ahead and set up the town hall now, by the way. So let's go ahead and make that our next big priority. I need a ton of stone for that, but the good news is there's still a lot lying around. Now, at some point, yeah, you do kind of use up your entire resource of stone, iron, and so on that are on the surface. There are ways to get around that. Namely, you can place some mines up against some of these mountains here. This is a way of getting yourself some iron or some coal, I believe, which can be very useful. Or, of course, you can place down a giant quarry, and this will start carving out all of the stone you're going to need for a while. Town hall is now done. Excellent. All right, so now we can see a whole load of statistics about the town, which is quite nice. Get a whole load of information about our production and so on, our current inventory, some graphs on a few different things as far as population. Nomads, that's the immigrants I was talking about. Nomads are going to come and visit us. And then here's our trade items. It does look like we have not only the pumpkin seeds, but also some peach seeds. So if I wanted to set up a beautiful orchard, we could do that. I like orchards. Peaches are delicious. It's one of my favorite fruits, actually. So let's just go ahead and place one down for fun. Now, the only downside to orchards is the trees do need a fair bit of time to reach maturity. It does take at least a couple of years to do so. But then it's a fairly low labor way of producing a halfway decent amount of food. I do like a good orchard. We're doing pretty good on firewood and food right now. Most of our resources are decent. Enough tools and clothes are coming in that I'm not feeling very worried about a lot of that. We'll start working on the boarding house so I can start getting some upgrades for my other homes fairly safely as long as I can harvest enough of the stone. And so far things are looking really solid. This is a halfway decent little fledgling town. Here comes another trader. Let's see what this guy has for me. You have chickens! Yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and get myself at least a couple of chickens. For that, of course, I need to trade off some firewood, which is a value of 4 each. I can buy 2 chickens. I accept this, thank you. Which, of course, means now I need to get myself a pasture. Bada boom. Assign the chickens before any of them die, and now with 2, we should see that their population will gradually grow, producing eggs, and once there are too many animals, we can go ahead and start killing them to get some extra food. Pastures are a long-term investment, very good. Our first person has died in year 9. All right, that is going to be the first of many gravestones added into the cemetery. And you can see that their role automatically does get replaced by your laborers, which is one reason you always need to have these guys on hand. Year 10 has hit, our deaths are reasonably minor, and we have enough replacement population. We are looking pretty darn good. Gonna go ahead and set up another quadrime of our herbalists, foresters, hunters, and gatherers, and so on, more storage, and we'll just keep expanding a fair bit more. So here's the big problem that I can see with Banished, besides that it's just a fairly old game, and it does feel a little bit dated in some ways. The biggest issue to me is that it's been just under 2 hours, and we've kind of done almost everything there is to do in the game. Not to say that we're done, not by a long shot, right? We haven't got any brewers, we haven't gotten miners and stonecutters. I could go for the hospital and for the chapel, not a priority right now, but we could do that at some point pretty soon. But almost every other profession has been met. Now it's a matter of gradually expanding our population and covering the map, trying to get up to 1,000 population without dying. Carefully expanding our housing to get a good birth rate, expanding out our food, our other resources, etc., etc. So there's a lot more to do, a long way to go in the game. We've just kind of experienced most of it, and now it should be careful, rinse, and repeat. By the way, do you have anything I care about? You do have bean seeds, but they cost 2,500 to get. Yeah, seeds are expensive. We're not doing anything about these for at least a little while. Boo! All right, you go ahead and get out of here. Anyway, I think this game would have really benefited from continued development. I mean, it's really impressive that this game is what it is. It was so revolutionary, considering I think the whole thing was made by only one person, right? That just makes this whole game really, really impressive for what it was 10 years ago. But it would have benefited from some continued expansion, either some DLCs or some content packs or whatever else, in order to get more jobs, more professions, and so on. We see that with some of the follow-on successors to this game, things like Farthest Frontier, Settlement Survival, etc., that do have more jobs, more production chains, a bit more complexity, and therefore it takes a fair bit longer to feel like you've unlocked everything that matters. The one really saving grace for this has actually been the modding community. There is one mod that I know of for Banished that is really transformative, and it is called the Colonial Charter mod. And it added in a whole load of jobs, a load of different resources and buildings and so on. There was so much more to do. I think that's the only major overhaul mod this game ever got, and it's really a shame because I feel like there could have been a lot more, but it's a really good one. And I do believe I actually played that on the channel a while back, so if that's something you guys feel like you might want to watch, I would go ahead and look that one up. It's a great mod, right? Make some charcoal, get some bricks, go for more of a Renaissance theme, right? Kind of colonial England kind of a theme to it. It was really fun. I just kind of wish that was in the base game, you know what I mean? We have a church up and a running. Let's go ahead and assign a quick cleric just so we can say we did. That's 69 members who are going to church. Very nice. Ooh, we're actually getting capped out on food. Hold up. No, let's go ahead and boost up our maximum yields. No reason to let all that food go to waste. And hey, we're even producing some peaches. Only a couple of workers, and we're going to produce probably about 800 or 900 peaches would be my guess. About 800, yeah, a little bit more. That was pretty spot on, actually. So yeah, orchards are fairly efficient, and of course, I'm guessing if we take a look over here at the Gatherer's Hut, we're still going to find, yeah, this is very efficient. Only 3 workers over here. We're still producing about 1,200 food, so that's about 400 food each. That is on par over here. So that's good. That is really solid. We've definitely found our seam as far as food production. This is exactly as I remember it. And we've even got ourselves a hospital over here. Not that I need it right now. We haven't even had a single group of nomads come and ask to join, which means we don't actually have any risk of plague. A little bit weird that no nomads have come by. I wonder why they don't want to be around me. I feel like before I end this video, we should get ourselves a nice little tavern right next to the church. I don't remember if we can brew anything from the peaches. Maybe some peach schnapps of sorts? Make our citizens happy that way? Whoa, 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 whoa! What is happening? Hold on, a bunch of people dying from a tornado! Oh my god, no! Oh no! This is like custom designed to absolutely obliterate me. God, what are you doing to me? Holy crud, this is wow. This might actually be the end. What? You're kidding me! Wow, I've had disasters in Banished. I've never had one designed to literally destroy every building I've got! Wow, and that's Banished, everyone. I could try to recover from this, but I don't even want to. Not only will it take forever, but also this is just like a perfect ending to the video. I could not have made that worse if I tried. Absolutely amazing. So now you understand a little bit more about the hazards of Banished. And the nature is trying to kill you. It's great. Historically speaking, guys, this is one of my absolute favorite games, and it really did so much to inspire a huge new genre of games that I've continued to enjoy for many, many years. Frostpunk or Kingdoms Reborn, etc. They ultimately can be traced down to this moment 10 years ago when Banished was released. A really fun way to approach strategy and management, and it's something that I absolutely look back on with a tremendous amount of fondness. This game may have not have aged amazingly, you know, I'll give it that. All right, fair enough. But considering it was made by one guy and did not receive a ton of support after release, I think it's still holding up pretty beautifully. Thank you all very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If so, I would ask you to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, make sure you hit that notify bell, and I will see you guys next time.
Glorious leader, praise be his name. Heavenly ruler, to us he came. May he have mercy and heretics be cleansed. This war is over, his arrival means the end.